Hello, I'm going to feature and discuss the former First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. And we'll start with the 1930s. And late in the 1930s, great contralto singer, Marian Anderson, an opera singer, and that means that she had a certain range that's rare, that very few people have. She was a wonderful singer. Matter of fact, Arturo Toscanini, who was believed to be the best musical conductor in the world, an Italian conductor who was very intense, who was a perfectionist, who had a photographic memory, he said that a voice like Marian Anderson comes along once in 100 years. He had great respect for Marian Anderson. And there was a request for Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C., Marian Anderson was going to sing. The Daughters of the American Revolution, the DAR, owned that building, Constitution Hall, and they rejected and would not allow Marian Anderson to sing. Now, the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt, was a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. She withdrew her membership immediately. Now, the NAACP, the Roosevelt administration, and some of the people that represented Marian Anderson petitioned, and they got a space in front of the Lincoln Memorial. So on Easter Day, April 9th, 1939, the most important musical event of the 20th century was held. Marian Anderson had never sang in front of a crowd that big. There were 75,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial, in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Yes, that's the same place where Dr. King gave his I Have a Dream speech in 1963, but this is 1939. And it was on the radio stations. Millions heard her on the radio, and 75,000 were there in person, including her friend, Eleanor Roosevelt. She sang beautifully, and everybody loved her, and they wanted more from her. She was an international star. Her fame went all around the world as one of the great singers in world history. In 1943, it's interesting, the Daughters of the American Revolution wanted her to sing again at Constitution Hall this time. So Marian Anderson agreed to do so, but it had to be an integrated audience, which they said, okay, and it was integrated, and blacks and whites were there. Half of the audience was black. She was featured, of course, in Ebony magazine in 1947. This is a magazine that John Johnson had started. He started Ebony, Negro Digest, and Jet magazine. And here on the cover is one of the greatest singers in the world, Marian Anderson. Also, I might mention that a couple of months after her singing on Easter Day, she received the Spingarn Award. The Spingarn Award is an award given by the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, which, as I mentioned, Eleanor Roosevelt was a member of the NAACP, and they gave her the most heralded award, the one African American who makes the biggest achievement to justice and equality for black people and for the country for that particular year. Marian Anderson won it that year. And you know who presented her award? None other than Eleanor Roosevelt. So we take a look at the history of Eleanor Roosevelt presenting the Spingarn Award to Marian Anderson, the opera singer who had really thrilled the world with her singing. She sang My Country 'Tis of Thee and some other songs on that Easter morning, and it was only for 25 minutes, but it was a fantastic experience for America and for the black race to note and remember, even up until today, of course. Now, I spoke about John Johnson. John Johnson, the editor of Negro Digest, he had these small magazines that he was publishing at this time. This is in the early 1940s. And he asked Miss Eleanor Roosevelt if she would write an article, because Miss Roosevelt was writing an article for newspapers and giving speeches. She was doing a lot of things, even separate from Franklin Roosevelt. And he asked her if she would write an article that he'd asked other people to write too, If I Were a Negro. So she agreed to write that, and the circulation went from 50,000 to 100,000, just like that. And in it, Miss Roosevelt said that she would have some problems if she were black, but she would have to have aggression, and she would have to have patience to realize change would come. So that's what she said in 1943. I don't know what she would say over 70 years later in 2021, but it was a part of the Negro Digest that John Johnson had published, and he later would start publishing Ebony magazine and Jet magazine. But Eleanor Roosevelt was a part of his circulation gain and his popularity with her article on If I Were a Negro, and she seemed to understand some of the trials and tribulations, and she was always against lynching, and she was always a proponent for civil and human rights, was Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, my dad, who in his 40s was a sergeant in World War II. And Dad always told the family as I was growing up that black soldiers and the black community loved Mrs. Roosevelt. I never heard him say that about Franklin Roosevelt, as awesome as he was as a president to America and to the blacks and everyone else. But he often said how much the black soldiers and the black community loved Mrs. Roosevelt. Now, she had a contribution to World War II, which was very important. In 1941, the War Department decided that they were going to train black pilots, black servicemen, to be pilots. And they were going to use Tuskegee University, it was called Tuskegee Institute at that time, as a training facility. This is in Alabama. Of course, Booker T. Washington was its first president and had built Tuskegee up to a powerful institution for blacks, and this was in the 1940s. So Eleanor Roosevelt went to Tuskegee in initially at Tuskegee. Now, there were other trainers that came. They had, 1,000 people that came through in the preparation for becoming pilots and also navigators and other things along with that. And what Miss Roosevelt did, though, she got in a plane with Captain Anderson, and he took her around for an hour and flew her around the grounds over Tuskegee, and it landed, and there was a picture of Miss Roosevelt just smiling and as happy as she could be from having taken this trip with Captain Anderson. And of course, some people were incensed that the First Lady was flying with a black pilot in the 1940s, the early years of aviation, but she certainly did, and it promoted the Tuskegee Airmen, and we all know of the heroics. They were one of the great, squadrons in American history. They escorted bombers during World War II, and they were known as Red Tails. And I have a couple of images on the wall of the Red Tails that made up the Tuskegee Airmen. But she really promoted and allowed their growth. And this was before the United States was actually in World War II, because as you know, on December 7th, her husband called that a day of infamy. It's when Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese, and that was December 7th, 1941, and the United States was officially in World War II, and they would continue to be, and the Tuskegee Airmen would continue to fly so many missions, escorting bombers as well as shooting down enemy aircraft until the end of World War II in 1945. We'll look some more at Eleanor Roosevelt on the next session.